In 1977, the Kentucky State Fair Board released a long-range master plan for the redevelopment and expansion of the Kentucky Fair and Exposition Center grounds. This included the construction of a brand new theme park. Several years later, the Fair Board began searching for a developer who could operate the planned park. On November 21, 1985, they signed a contract with Kentucky Entertainment Limited, headed by Dallas businessman Michael Jenkins. On December 13, 1985, Kentucky Entertainment Limited and the Fair Board announced plans for Kentucky Kingdom, a 13-acre theme park focused on Kentucky's history and culture that would open in 1987. Construction began in March of 1986, with the park opening just over a year later on May 23, 1987. Most of the reviews were negative, as visitors complained about the long lines and poor crowd control. Many believed that the park was way too small to accommodate large crowds. Guests complained that the park had too few attractions, and the attractions that they did have were aimed towards families of small children, with the exception of the park's roller coaster, Star Chaser, a Schwarzkopf Jetstar 1 model. Just after one season, the park filed for bankruptcy and closed its gates. During this time, all of the park's rides, with the exception of Star Chaser, were sold, so that way they could recoup some of their losses. In 1989, Ed Hart, a local businessman, purchased the rights to operate the park. He also decided to exercise the option in their deal with the Fair Board to lease an additional 13 acres, expanding the park to 26 acres. The park reopened in June 1990, with an estimated 2,000 people visiting the park on the first day of operation. Star Chaser, the park's marquee coaster, reopened, as well as a few new flat rides were added, including Bluebeard's Bounty, the Enterprise, Whirling Dervish, later renamed the Breakdance, as well as two brand new roller coasters, the first being a Vekoma boomerang named the Vampire, and the second being Thunder Run, a Din Corporation wooden coaster. But this was all just the beginning. During the 90s, the park saw a rapid expansion year after year. In late 1990, Kentucky Kingdom announced plans to build a water park, projected to be open by the spring of 1992. The 1991 season also saw the opening of the Quake, the first Vekoma Waikiki wave to open in North America. The park also opened the Flying Dutchman, a wooden chute swing ride that was relocated from Kings Island. Along with Hurricane Bay Water Park, the 1992 season included a $2.6 million, 150-foot tall Ferris wheel called the Giant Wheel. The 1993 season saw a new waterside complex open in Hurricane Bay that featured 4 different water slides. In 1994, the park opened Mile High Falls, which, upon its opening, was the world's tallest chute-to-chute ride, along with a family coaster built by Vekoma named Roller Skater. In April of 1995, the park saw the introduction of T2, Terror to the Second Power. Once again working with Vekoma, the ride was the second ever suspended looping coaster model, the first of its kind in North America. Standing at 101 feet tall with 2,172 feet of track, 5 inversions, and a top speed of 49 miles per hour. That same year, Elevator, a 177-foot tall in-twin drop tower, opened in October, just in time for the park's annual Halloween event, Howler Scream. In 1996, an upcharge attraction named Top Eliminator Dragsters opened. Park guests began to wonder what the park had up their sleeves for the 1997 season, as for the first time in the park's reopening, the 1996 season didn't see that much investment into the property. Little did they know what the park had planned. For the 1997 season, the park made its most expensive investment yet with the addition of Chang, a $12 million stand-up coaster manufactured by B&M that set the world record for stand-up coasters in height, drop, length, speed, and the amount of inversions. Standing at a height of 154 feet, a drop of 144 feet, a max speed of 63 miles per hour, and having 5 inversions, this coaster was a beast when it opened. The coaster also included the record for the world's tallest vertical loop on any coaster at a height of 121 feet. Chang, meaning long in Mandarin, would have a very loose Asian theme, with the extent of the theming just being only the sign. The ride originally featured an all-yellow color scheme, with the trains being painted yellow, purple, and red. The coaster opened with 2 7-row trains that allowed for a total of 4 riders per row. The coaster also featured a mid-course brake run, which would allow the coaster to operate with 3 trains, but only 2 trains were purchased for the coaster. The idea was, if the park needed to add the additional capacity, they could later on down the line. Chang would be built next to Kentucky Kingdom's water park, where the park's height limit was near its highest. Kentucky Kingdom had a strict height limit due to the nearby Louisville International Airport, allowing the taller attractions to only be built outside of the aircraft's flight paths. Due to the coaster mainly being on a flat plot of land, Chang was able to be quickly constructed without many issues or delays, and opened to the public in April of 1997. One thing to note is that the ride's transfer track building was not constructed in its first year, yet was added in 1998 and included 3 storage tracks, even though the ride only had 2 trains. The ride layout went as follows. Leaving the station, the train would start climbing up a 155-foot tall lift hill. At the top, the train went through a pre-drop, before making a slightly banked 180-degree turn. After this, the train went down a 144-foot drop into a 121-foot tall vertical loop. After the loop, the track rose to the right and into a 103.8-foot tall dive loop. Riders then rose into a turnaround over the station, and then the train entered a right-leaning 72-foot-tall incline loop. Now, this was known to be the most forceful part of the ride due to the speed that the train took this element. The train would then traverse a small S-bend bunny hill, giving a nice pop of airtime, before rising to the left into the mid-course brake run. The train would then take a straight drop off the mid-course brake run, once again providing some great airtime in the back of the train. It flipped riders into the first of 2 corkscrews. The ride would then turn right, weaving through the dive loop, then the track would make a ground-hugging left-hand turn, and then entered a low second corkscrew. After a right-hand turn, the train made a final 180-degree left-hand turn into the final brake runs before returning to the station. When all was said and done, Chang completed 5 inversions, traveled 4,155 feet of track, and took about 2.5 minutes to complete the ride experience. A fun fact about the layout is that the first section of Chang was a near-mirrored clone of the first half of Mantis at Cedar Point, just with no trim brake. Chang's block zones went as followed: the station block, lift block, which took up the entirety of the lift hill, block brake, which is from the top of the lift all the way to the end of the block brake, service block, which went from the end of the block brake all the way to the first set of brakes at the end of the attraction, safety block, transfer block, and waiting. Chang opened in the middle of the coaster wars, where every theme park was trying to break some type of world record. Like said earlier, at its opening, it was the world's tallest, fastest, and longest stand-up coaster. It also claimed the record of the largest drop and the most inversions on any stand-up coaster. All of these records had eclipsed those by Mantis, which opened at Cedar Point in 1996. Just 1 year later, in 1998, Riddler's Revenge opened at Six Flags Magic Mountain, surpassing every title that was held by Chang. Outside of the stand-up coaster model, the only record that Chang claimed was the record for the tallest vertical loop of any coaster in the world. Chang's restraints were a typical B&M stand-up restraint, featuring a long over-the-shoulder harness and a bicycle seat between the guest's legs. At the time of opening though, the restraints did not feature any seatbelts attached to the shoulder harness like was found on other stand-up coasters, allowing for faster dispatches. The shoulder harnesses were attached to an articulating seat, allowing it to move up and down as the guests were entering and exiting, so that the shoulder harnesses could adjust to the guest's height. Guests loved the new stand-up coaster, and while some people weren't a fan of the forces that it put on the riders' legs due to the intensity of the ride experience, they were able to look past this due to it being the most unique and thrilling coaster at the park. Thanks to the addition of Chang, as well as other record-breaking and first-of-their-kind attractions added through the 1990 to 1997 seasons, the park was considered one of the fastest-growing amusement parks in North America, as park attendance had increased from 130,000 guests during the 1990 season to 1.2 million guests over the 1997 season. September 26, 1997, the rights to operate Kentucky Kingdom would be sold to Premier Parks for $64 million, and the deal was finalized on November 7th. As part of the agreement, Premier Parks agreed to continue to open new attractions at the park through at least 1999. During the off-season, Premier Parks acquired Six Flags from Time Warner, and as such, on June 21, 1998, the park reopened as Six Flags Kentucky Kingdom. Also, on June 21, 1998, Twisted Sisters, a dueling wooden coaster, officially opened to the public. Hook's Lagoon, an interactive play structure with water activities, was also added that year to Hurricane Bay. For the 1999 season, Six Flags transformed Kings Louis Playground into Looney Tunes Movie Town, and added the Batman Stunt Show Spectacular in the back of the park behind T2. But the headlining attraction for this year was the Penguin's Blizzard River. Loosely themed to the Batman villain, the Penguin, this intimate rapids ride would be the first ride on the park to take on a DC theme. At the same time, across the park, Vampire, the park's Vekoma Boomerang, was removed due to technical issues, and was relocated to Six Flags New England for the 2000 season, where it would reopen at Splashback. The park continued to make small updates to the rides. Chang saw its first of many repaints. In total, while the coaster was at Kentucky Kingdom, the ride saw 3 color schemes over 12 years, the original being all yellow track and supports. In 1999, the ride would now feature a lime green track and purple supports, the same as Medusa color schemes from the Floorless coasters opening that same year. A few years later, the coaster would receive its 3rd color scheme. Chang went back to the yellow track, but this time would have blue supports. The coaster was actually rumored to get a 4th paint job at the park. This time, it would feature green track and black supports, rethemed into Riddler's Revenge to bring more DC IP into the park. This would have also saw T2 changed over to Batman and the surrounding area into Gotham City, but for some reason, this never happened. Guests were hopeful in thinking that Six Flags would continue to add investments throughout the 2000s, and would continue to expand the park. With the addition of Roadrunner Express, a Maurer Wild Mouse coaster, and the Sky Coaster both added to the Vampire Plot of Land for the 2000 season, but sadly, nothing was added for the 2001 or 2002 season. For the 2003 season, the park would receive the used Schwarzkopf shuttle loop named Grease Lightning, relocated from Six Flags Over Georgia. The 2004 season saw no new additions, but did see the removal of the Quake. That plot of land would be used for the 2005 season for another expansion of Hurricane Bay, and it would be used for the Pro Slide Tornado water attraction. Guests were quickly realizing that the quality of the park was dropping. A lot of rides were closed, being removed, and being replaced with other hand-me-down attractions from other Six Flags park, and the only truly new rides would be for the water park. Attendance began to drop at the park. The 2006 season once again saw no new investment, and for 2007, the park opened Deluge, the first hydromagnetic water coaster. Fans loved the new water coaster, but events later on in the season would change the park's fate forever.
Thursday, June 21st, 2007, a cable snaps on the Superman Tower of Power ride and severs the feet of 13-year-old Caitlin Lassiter.
On June 21st, 2007, an accident occurred on the Superman Tower of Power drop tower, which resulted in a 13-year-old girl having both feet amputated at the ankles after a cable fracture occurred on the ride. On November 29, 2007, it was announced that Superman Tower of Power would not reopen for the 2008 season. Later on that season, the ride was removed. The park originally was to replace the ride with a new attraction for the 2008 season, but this never occurred. Due to the major debt that Six Flags was in, the entire northwest section of the park, which included Twisted Twins, Mile High Falls, and the Zeppelin spinning blimp ride, was completely closed for the 2008 and 2009 seasons. Due to the accident and even more rides being closed, park attendance dropped to a record low. Chang, the park's marquee coaster, began removal on the weekend of September 19, 2009, to expand Splashwater Kingdom, but this expansion would soon be rejected. This didn't make sense to park guests or staff. Why would you give away the signature attraction for a water park expansion when you could have just fit that somewhere else, right? This rightfully left a lot of people worried about the park's future.
But just hours ago, Six Flags announced that Kentucky Kingdom would close its doors for good. It's effective immediately.
That's because Six Flags announced just a few hours ago that it is rejecting its lease with the Kentucky State Fair Board and that Kentucky Kingdom will permanently close. However, the Fair Board, which owns the land that the park is on, as well as city officials, say they're going to continue the fight to keep this park open.
During the off-season, park management received calls saying that the positions had been terminated and the park was not going to reopen for the 2010 season. Six Flags later announced plans to sell off Kentucky Kingdom amongst the bankruptcy. The removal of Chang and the closure of Six Flags Kentucky Kingdom caused the Kentucky State Fair Board to sue Six Flags for ownership of the rides. After the 2009 season, the coaster was sent to Six Flags Great America in Gurnee, Illinois. Many enthusiasts thought this was a very weird choice to send the coaster to, since the park already had Iron Wolf, a B&M stand-up coaster. The rumor was that the park planned on retiring Iron Wolf and would build Chang somewhere else in the park, but this did not happen. Soon after the coaster arrived, rumors began swirling that the coaster was actually not going to be installed at Great America. Instead, the rumors were that it would be heading to Six Flags Great Adventure. The coaster was rumored to go into a few locations around the park, the first being in the Old Country, where it would take up most of the remaining area for Batman and Robin the Chiller, the Autobahn, Music Express, Enterprise, and Stuntman's Freefall. Since this area was abandoned since 2007 with the removal of Batman and Robin the Chiller, this would have been a great way to bring new life into this area of the park. The second rumored location would be in the woods next to Nitro and Looney Tunes Seaport. This would have been in the same area that Jersey Devil resides in today. Both of these locations would have been great fits for the coaster, as it would not require the removal of any operating attraction in the park, but sadly the park would pick a different location. The park ultimately decided to place the coaster in the boardwalk area of the park, where the ride would replace a park icon for the past 21 years. In July of 2010, Great Adventure announced that they would be closing the Great American Scream Machine on July 18th, for a new attraction coming to the park for the 2011 season. Before the coaster was even closed, markings for the new attraction showed up all around the site. Just a few weeks after the coaster was announced to close, Great American Scream Machine gave its final rides. The same night that the coaster was closed, work walls went up around the attraction, and power was cut to the ride. The park wasted no time removing Scream Machine, and by the end of July, the only parts of the ride that were left were the lift hill and the first vertical loop. By the middle of September, the ride was completely removed. Thankfully, it wouldn't be too much longer until park guests would know what was coming to the park.
In brightest day, in blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power, Green Lantern's light. Stand up to your fear on the new Green Lantern Stand-Up Coaster. Last chance to save on Six Flags season passes. Hurry, price goes up and free parking offer goes away after May 30th. Go big. Go Six Flags Great Adventure.
Green Lantern will open at the park for the 2011 season. Themed to the DC comic superhero of the same name, the theme was chosen to coincide with the film scheduled for release later that year. Green Lantern at Great Adventure was the first of two coasters to open in 2011 themed after the new movie, the other being Green Lantern's First Flight. Green Lantern's First Flight was an Intamin Zack spin located at Six Flags Magic Mountain, and well, We're gonna have to talk about that in another video. This would be the park's 5th B&M coaster, the others being Batman the Ride, an inverted coaster, Medusa, at the time known as Bizarro, a floorless coaster, Nitro, a hyper coaster, and Superman Ultimate Flight, a flying coaster. This would mean that Great Adventure had the record for the most B&Ms in one park. Green Lantern would also be the park's 2nd stand-up coaster, the first being Shockwave, which lasted only 3 seasons due to the ride relocation program. Throughout the remainder of the 2010 season, track and support segments for the ride began to arrive, with a fresh coat of emerald green paint on the track and jet black paint on the supports. One thing that really stuck out was the yellow corkscrew track. The park decided to paint the ride's 2nd corkscrew the same color yellow that Chang was, but theme it to the Parallax, one of Green Lantern's enemies. Crews continued to dig and pour the ride's many footers in preparation for vertical construction. Once the park was closed for the season, sections of the parking lot were removed as Green Lantern's first hill, drop, and first loop would extend along Superman, as the new coaster would take up a much larger plot of land than Scream Machine once did. Due to the snow, it was taking a bit longer for some of the footers to dry, so to ensure construction wouldn't be delayed, crews pre-installed sections of supports prior to installing them onto their footers. In January of 2011, the ride began vertical construction, beginning with the ride station and moving on to the lift hill. By March, most of the coaster's first half was fully installed, with many more supports being installed around the site. This is also when the first signs of the photo booth were also starting to take shape. Crews installed the track segments and the direction of travel for the coaster. By mid-April, the coaster's track was complete, and work began on landscaping, completion of the photo booth, station, maintenance building, and paths. Prior to the park opening for the season, the parking lot around Green Lantern was adjusted to accommodate the new coaster. New landscaping, fencing, and a new access road was created to get to Green Lantern and Superman. By mid-May, the coaster was complete, yet there was a big change. The ride's yellow corkscrew was repainted green, and the ride's vertical loop was instead repainted to that same color yellow. The park decided to move the theming pieces right before the ride opened to the public, as they thought it would be a more dramatic statement. As May went on, the coaster's queue line was fitted with decorative awnings under the track segments, and other themed pieces were installed. The ride's queue line featured a series of comic book style cutout boards telling the story of Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps. A fighter jet was located in the queue line, referencing Jordan's occupation as a pilot. It was previously used as a prop for the former Right Stuff Mach 1 Adventure motion simulator ride. While on the ride, Green Lantern's oath would play over loudspeakers as you climbed the left hill, and at the bottom of the first drop you came face to face with a 3D parallax cutout with clenching arms which the train passed through. The one downside to this theme is that the coaster didn't feature any grass in the ride infield. Like Scream Machine, the park decided to use gray stones to cover up the dirt for the ride's restricted area, with the attempt to give it a more military base feel. Green Lantern reused the same queue line entrance building as the Great American Scream Machine. Like Scream Machine, Lantern's queue line was a long walk to the station building, with the only set of switchbacks at the bottom of the ride's station stairs, as well as at the main entrance. This was done so the park didn't have to have team members walk too far to extend or de-extend the ride's queue line, as the ride opened with a team member staffed at the ride's entrance, and another team member at the Flash Pass merge point. This queue line provided amazing angles of the coaster though, as you were walking under and around the attraction while it was in operation. Green Lantern held its media day on May 19th, and soon after, it opened to the general public. The public really enjoyed Green Lantern due to its unique ride experience. Leading up to this point, the guests that had experienced the stand-up coaster experienced it either at King's Dominion or Great Adventure's original stand-up coaster, and they were both known to be pretty rough and uncomfortable rides. More seasoned coaster enthusiasts noticed that the coaster was a tad bit rougher than what it was when it was at Kentucky Kingdom, but it was nothing to be too upset about, as it didn't hurt the ride's rewritability. Green Lantern on average received waits of 1 to 2 hours on a normal day, and 3 to 4 hours during Fright Fest. Six Flags knew that Green Lantern was going to be very popular at Great Adventure, so they decided to run the coaster with 3 trains, except they didn't decide to buy a 3rd train for Green Lantern. Great Adventure instead borrowed Riddler's Revenge 3rd train from Six Flags Magic Mountain, repainted it, and removed the last row, and ran it on Green Lantern for the first few years that the coaster was at Great Adventure. The ride's trains were known as the X, Y, and Z trains, with the X train being known as the Riddler train. Another way to tell the trains apart is that the X train had silver modesty bars instead of the black ones featured on the other 2 trains. The goal was to have 2 trains on the track at any given time while loading the 3rd, to help with the crowds, but this ended up being more challenging than it seemed. When Green Lantern was running all 3 trains, the ride was theoretically able to complete 56 dispatches per hour, resulting in a throughput of 1,558 riders per hour. But this was not possible due to the issues that guests had getting in and out of the trains, as well as the cycle time being over 2 minutes. The maximum amount of dispatches that the ride was actually able to achieve was closer to 52 dispatches per hour, resulting in a throughput of 1,456, which is still pretty impressive. When the ride was operating with 2 trains, the ride was able to achieve 32 dispatches per hour, or 952 riders per hour. and when the ride was only running one train, the ride was able to dispatch 17 trains per hour, or 476 riders per hour, which was not ideal. Green Lantern in its opening years would typically run with 6 attendants, with 3 trains online, but was able to go down to 4 attendants if there were staffing challenges. When the ride was running with 6 attendants, front load and unload check rows 1 through 3, both of the 2 middle attendants would check rows 4 through 6, and both back attendants would just check row 7. But when the ride was running with 4 attendants, front load and unload would check rows 1 through 3 once again, but the back 2 attendants would check rows 4 through 7. The ride was actually able to run pretty efficiently when it ran with 6 attendants, providing pretty good ridership numbers. The ride also opened with a single rider line, but outside the first 2 seasons, this line barely was ever used due to the fact that it required the ride to have a grouper, which would cost the park more money. In the park size, they would rather have an additional team member on platform to help with guests getting in and out of the trains faster, to allow for the ride crew to dispatch trains faster, versus a grouper and have slower dispatches, which I can get behind. One funny thing about the ride's single rider line is that the ride's startup horn was located and pointed right at the single rider queue, so anytime the ride went down and the lift needed to be restarted, the horn would blare right at the guests. The ride's restraint system proved to be pretty challenging for park guests. Great Adventure posted signage in the queue and in the station, showing guests how to enter and exit the train properly, as well as the proper rider position to try to expedite the ride's dispatch times. Ride crews would also consistently spiel at guests, so that way they knew that they needed to stand up with their feet flat on the floor. Another thing that slowed down dispatches were the seatbelts. After the first few years of operation at Kentucky Kingdom, the park decided to add seatbelts onto the shoulder harnesses, often adding more time to the restraint check due to guests incorrectly buckling them, or not being able to buckle them at all due to guests with unique body dimensions. When this would happen, guests would have to be removed from the train, and the row would have to be rechecked. Due to Green Lantern being a B&M, the ride really didn't have that much downtime. The ride occasionally would see some nuisance faults like a park position fault, where the ride would stop just short or just past the parking sensor, allowing the train not to be unlocked. The ride was also known to occasionally overshoot the station on rainy days due to the drive tires not being able to properly stop the train when wet. Green Lantern would also commonly have what was known as a sunlight error. This is when light would hit one of the ride's sensors on either the lift or the block, typically around sunset, causing the coaster to detect a ghost train and causing a ride stoppage. And the ride crew would have to have maintenance come and reset the ride. Now, the ride was not able to be reset, the ride would occasionally have to be evacuated. Another issue that was had on Green Lantern was with the alignment of the pre-lift section. The X train, or the Riddler train, would often have a large banging sound against the bottom of the lift that would cause it to shake quite a bit and cause the ride to fall at the base of the lift. The Riddler train was also known to run significantly faster than the other 2 trains, occasionally causing overspeed faults. One huge issue the ride had in its opening years was when the ride was running 3 trains, guests were passing out on the brake run. After waiting hours inside the queue line with no shade, and then having no shade being stacked on the final brake run, it was a major problem for both the track as well as riders. During the summer, when park staff was transferring trains on and off, there were times that they were unable to properly slide the transfer track fully back into place due to heat expanding the track. To solve this, techs would have to go out with ice water and picks to get the track to line back up. An issue that the ride crew would have would be during evacuations from the block break. Besides the block break being so far away from the station, once crews were at the block, they would have to fully cross a loaded train of guests to be able to open the restraints. The bracket for the train was on the left-hand side of the train, while the staircase was on the right-hand side. While it's common for coasters to close for high wind, temperatures, rain, and lightning, Great Adventure would definitely push their coasters to the limits when it came to cold temperatures. Park often ran the coaster for Holiday in the Park, meaning that it would be open until January. During this time, temperatures could drop as low as the teens, but if the park was able to get the ride going, they would open it to the park guests, typically with just 1 train. When it came to heavy rain though, the ride would often go to reduced capacity. This was due to overspeeds or the possibility of the ride not parking properly in the station. Another issue the ride had when it came to rain was flooding. Typically, when there was enough heavy rain or a bad thunderstorm, the ride's infield, specifically the second corkscrew, would flood, causing the ride to remain closed until the water is drained. At the end of the 2013 season, Great Adventure had to send its 3rd train back to Magic Mountain. At the time, Magic Mountain was open on weekends year-round, so the 3rd train would allow Riddler to be open with 2 trains the entire year if needed. One rumor that went around was that when Magic Mountain received their train back, they only got 5 rows of the 7 that were sent. This was because Great Adventure was going to attempt to run Green Lantern with 2 8-car trains instead of 3 7-car trains. The park ultimately decided to not add the additional car into each train though. As the years went on, Green Lantern's theming began to deteriorate very quickly. The ride's 3D parallax cutout partially fell off, causing the entire 3D aspect of the cutout to be removed, for a while leaving just a glue outline. This was eventually replaced the following season with a non-3D version of the same decal. The plane and the queue line slowly began to fall apart. and the Green Lantern cutouts on the station as well as on the entrance sign became extremely cracked and faded. During the 2021 season, rumors began swirling that Green Lantern's next door neighbor, the Parachute Tower, would be permanently closed. And this would eventually end up being true, as the park announced that the Parachutes would give its last ride at the end of the 2022 season, and would be removed shortly after. However, this didn't happen. The ride has been standing but not operating since 2022, and the ongoing rumor is that Great Adventure had no good way to remove the ride without possibly damaging other nearby attractions, like Green Lantern or Twister. This sparked new rumors about the possibility of Green Lantern getting removed, as the park didn't really seem to need the coaster. By this point, the coaster had been at Great Adventure for 11 years, was becoming very rough, and it just didn't see the ridership numbers that it did a few seasons before. Many enthusiasts thought it was going to be sent to another Six Flags park and converted into a floorless coaster, as this was the trend that was happening for these aging stand-up coasters at the time. However, the ride did not close. In November of 2023, Six Flags and Cedar Fair announced that they were planning a merger between the two chains. The main reason was because both companies were struggling. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, both companies were billions of dollars in debt. And by merging the companies, the new company would be able to consolidate some of that debt. Many enthusiasts didn't think that this was going to happen, as why would these two rival companies want to merge together when the parks have been competing next to each other for decades? Some were excited about the possibility of this happening, as Cedar Fair was known for being the cleaner, more well-run park, and Six Flags was known for their willingness to build new, innovative prototype attractions, which Cedar Fair stopped doing long ago. On July 1st, 2024, the merger was complete. Both companies were now one chain. Subtle little things began to change around the park, like updated logos and fees being removed. For the most part, the 2024 season seemed like it was on the up and up for the chain. The park did do a lot of beautification projects. The front gate turnstiles were removed, and the entrance area was opened up for a better arrival experience. The park also removed the old paintball building, allowing you to be able to walk the full length of Dream Street once again. With this, they were also allowing guests to purchase bricks that they would add to the walkway. They also began fixing up the Green Lantern signage, as the main entrance sign was fully replaced and once again looked amazing. However, even though Great Adventure did all of these great things for 2024 and the 50th anniversary, they were still struggling. Most of the rides when they reopened were only running one train. The Ferris wheel and the log flume were both delayed. The Skyway remained closed and was under refurbishment. The brand new coaster, Flash Vertical Velocity, was delayed another year until 2025, and most of the haunted houses were not ready for the opening of Fright Fest Extreme. But this is just the beginning of what would be a major hit to the park. Halfway through the 2024 season, rumors began swirling about the permanent closure of a bunch of classic and iconic attractions at the park. The rumor was still floating around that Green Lantern would be removed and replaced with a new attraction for 2026. With Green Lantern being removed, that means that the park could finally remove the Parachute Tower, which at this point had been standing but not operating for 2 years. While this upset some enthusiasts, no one was really shocked by it. What did shock people, however, was the rumor that the park was planning on removing the world's tallest and fastest operating coaster, Kingdakev. Many enthusiasts could not believe and refused to believe that Great Adventure was willing to remove one of their marquee coasters. But that's not all. With Kingdakev's removal, that would also mean the removal of Zumanjaro, Drop of Doom, the world's tallest and fastest drop tower, Twister, a Huss topspin, and the Skyway. Many enthusiasts refused to believe that the park would remove 6 attractions in one season, especially ones that meant so much to people. YouTube content creators began giving warnings, saying that they believed this to be true as they were hearing it from upper management from the Six Flags chain. And the rumor was that the final day for the attractions that were still in operation would be on November 10th, 2024. Enthusiasts who believed the rumors flooded to the park to get their final rides on Kingdakev and Green Lantern. Many people chose not to believe it, as the park had made no announcement of this happening. Surely the park would want to celebrate these rides because they've done so much for the park, right? Well, sadly no. From what I've been told, Great Adventure was told that they were unable to speak about any of the ride closures until upper Six Flags management allowed them to do so. Sadly, this would mean that the announcement would not happen until November 14th. 4 days after these attractions had taken their final rides. Work began almost immediately to remove Green Lantern. The ride's queue line was the first thing to be removed. The first piece of the track to be removed were the low sections by the first corkscrew. At first, people thought that the ride was going to get relocated, but upon further inspection, you could tell that the crews were cutting the track right next to the connection points, meaning that the coaster would never operate again. As the weeks went on, the sections of the rides that did not have electrical components were removed, beginning with the corkscrews, then the incline loop, the dive loop, and eventually the mid-course. Crews removed as much as they could before moving on to the station, lift, and first drop. Since the park was still open, they chose to do these sections last as it would impact the parking lot. Once enough of Green Lantern was removed, the park decided to implode the Parachute Tower right onto the former spot of the coaster. So why is it gone? Well, it's for a few reasons. While the ridership was down compared to previous years, guests would still ride Green Lantern. The issue was that the coaster was pushing 30 years of operation, and that's a very long time for any coaster to be in operation. But I don't think that the coaster would be gone this soon if it wasn't for the merger. The merger fast-tracked a lot of these closures, that way the newer Six Flags management could focus on making the parks a better overall experience, focusing more on the quality of rides versus the quantity of rides. And removing older, unpopular, or maintenance-heavy attractions would allow them to save a lot of money on operating costs, as well as be able to bring in new experiences. And sadly, Green Lantern fell into all of these categories, so it made sense for the removal. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of the way Six Flags decided to close these attractions without any warning, and telling guests that there were no plans on removing these attractions until after they've already given their final rides and demolition permits were already filed. This left a bad impression on a lot of enthusiasts as well as the general public. People made long-lasting memories on these attractions, so it's only right that if you know the ride's going to be closing, announce it to park fans so that way they can get their final rides. But anyways, that's going to do it for another episode of Why's It Gone. So tell me, did you ever get to ride Green Lantern? Did you get to ride it as Chang? What were your thoughts on the ride? Would you have liked to see the ride relocated to another park? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have any suggestions on another attraction you would like me to cover, let me know in the comments. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell as it really helps the channel out, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care. Bye.